My name's Danielle. I'm 26. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and this happened 2 summers ago when my best friend Jess and I were driving back from a trip out to Albuquerque, taking the long way on I-40 through the desert at night because it was cooler than driving in the daytime heat. I need to tell you this one carefully because even now, Jess and I don't fully agree on everything that happened, and honestly, I think that's the part that scares me the most. We left Albuquerque around 10 at night, planning to get home by 2 or 3 in the morning. The drive out there is nothing but flat black desert on either side of the highway. A few scattered lights way off in the distance that might be ranches, might be nothing at all. We had the windows cracked, music low, just talking, the way you do on a long drive with someone you've known since middle school. Somewhere around 1 in the morning, the low fuel light came on. I remember Jess checking the GPS and saying there was a station about 8 miles up, and I remember feeling relieved because 8 miles felt manageable. What I didn't account for was that the gauge dropped faster than it should have. I don't know if it was a faulty sensor or just bad luck, and about 4 miles short of that station, the engine sputtered, coughed, and died. We coasted on to the shoulder in total darkness. No streetlights out there, no other cars, not one in either direction. I killed the hazards to save the battery after about 10 minutes, and that's when it really hit me how dark it actually was. No moon that night, just this heavy black sky, thick with more stars than I'd ever seen, which would have been beautiful under literally any other circumstances. Both of our phones were down to single digits of battery, and neither of us had signal worth anything out there, one flickering bar that dropped in and out. We pulled up the map before it died and saw we weren't far from that gas station Jess had spotted earlier, maybe 1.5 miles on foot. We talked it over for a few minutes, and honestly, walking felt safer than sitting on the shoulder of a highway in the pitch dark, hoping someone would stop for 2 women at 1 in the morning. So we walked. The desert at night has this sound to it that's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. Not silence exactly, but this low, constant hum of insects, and every so often something rustling in the brush off the road that you convince yourself is a rabbit or a lizard, because the alternative is not something you want to think about while you're on foot in the open. We saw the gas station's light before we saw the building itself, this glow on the horizon that got brighter as we got closer, and by the time we reached it, I felt this wave of relief so strong I actually laughed out loud. It was a small independent station, not a chain, one of those with a single row of pumps and a little convenience store attached, and the sign out front was lit up bright, red letters spelling out "Open 24 hours." The lights inside were on too, fluorescent, that flat white light spilling out through the windows onto the empty parking lot. No cars, no other people, just us in this glowing little building sitting alone in the middle of the desert. We walked up to the door and it was locked. I knocked and nothing happened. Jess pressed her face to the glass and said she could see the counter, the shelves, everything looked normal, stocked, ready for business, but no one was behind the register. We knocked again, harder this time, and waited. And that's when the light in the back room, past the counter, flicked on. I saw it happen, so did Jess. A door back there, maybe a stockroom or an office, lit up under the crack at the bottom, and then, after maybe 15 seconds, went dark again. We called out, said we just needed help, ran out of gas, nothing threatening about it at all, nothing. No response. A minute or two later, we heard a radio turn on somewhere inside. Just a few seconds of what sounded like classic rock, tinny and distant, like it was coming from a back room, and then it cut off completely. Silence again. I want to be honest with you about how that felt standing outside that door. It didn't feel like nobody was there. It felt like somebody very specifically didn't want us to know they were there, and that is a completely different, much worse feeling.
Jess started saying we should just go back to the car and wait for morning, and I agreed, though neither of us said out loud what we were both clearly thinking, which was walking away from that glowing building with someone potentially watching us through those windows felt just as unsafe as staying. We started walking back down that same stretch of dark highway, faster than we'd walked coming in, and I kept looking over my shoulder at that gas station until the light behind us shrank down to almost nothing. When we got back to the car, it was unlocked. I remember locking it. I remember it specifically because I always double check out of habit, and Jess remembers me doing it too. We stood there for a second, just looking at the door handle before either of us said anything. We checked inside before getting in, which in hindsight feels like a strange thing to do, but felt completely necessary at the time. Checked the back seat, checked under it, and everything looked the same except for one thing. My backpack, which I'd left on the passenger side floor, was sitting upright on the seat instead. I'd left it lying flat. Neither of us could explain that. We got in, locked the doors immediately, and just sat there in the dark, not talking, both of us watching the road behind us through the mirrors, until finally, close to 4 in the morning, a highway patrol car happened to pass and we flagged it down. The officer helped us get a gas can from a station up the road, a different one 20 minutes further along that was actually staffed, and we got back on the road without incident. We never went back to that first gas station. I don't even know its name. I've looked for it since on maps and satellite images, and I genuinely can't find it again, though Jess swears she's found something that might be it, half collapsed and clearly abandoned for years. Nothing like the lit-up, stocked building we walked up to that night. We don't agree on that part either. She thinks that abandoned building is the one we saw. I don't think it can be. I remember the lights. I remember the shelves stocked full behind that glass. I remember that radio. Tell me, who was inside that station and why deliberately not answer 2 women standing outside alone at 1 in the morning? I don't have a satisfying answer for any of it, and neither does Jess. Tell me your story. I want to hear about it in the comments or send it to our mail in the description. Lock your doors. Check them twice.
My name's Megan. I'm 29 years old. I live in Albany, New York, and I need to tell you about the weekend my boyfriend Ryan and I drove up to the Adirondacks to close up his family's lake house, because a year later I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. The house belonged to Ryan's grandfather originally, this little 2-bedroom cabin on a lake up near Long Lake, New York. Every October, before the pipes could freeze, somebody in the family had to drive up, drain the plumbing, board the windows, shut the whole place down for winter. That year, it was our turn. It was supposed to be simple. Get there Friday afternoon, handle the work Saturday, drive home Sunday morning. A weekend away, honestly. Kind of romantic. Just the 2 of us, a fireplace, the lake. We got up there around 4 in the afternoon on Friday, and I remember how beautiful the drive-in was. The maples were doing that full-on New England thing, orange and red against the steep gray sky, and the air had that specific smell, wet leaves, distant wood smoke, that cold mineral smell that comes off a lake in autumn. It was gorgeous, it really was. That's what makes the rest of it so hard to square with how the day started. The lake itself was quiet in a way that felt normal at first. Most of the cabins ringing the shoreline were already closed for the season. That's just how it works up there. Everybody clears out by mid-October. Dark windows, docks pulled out of the water and stacked on the grass, a couple of boats up on blocks under blue tarps. It felt peaceful, isolated in a nice way, the kind of quiet you'd drive 3 hours for. Ryan got the fire going while I unpacked groceries, and around 6, he went out to grab the toolbox and firewood from the car. I heard him try the ignition. Nothing. Not even that weak clicking sound a battery makes when it's almost dead. Just silence. He came back in looking annoyed more than worried, said maybe the cold had gotten to it, or the battery was just old. We didn't have cell signal. 1 bar, flickering, gone, typical for out there, so calling anyone wasn't really an option. That's when the caretaker showed up. We hadn't heard a car. I remember that specifically because I looked out the window and there was no vehicle anywhere, and yet this man was just walking up out of the tree line toward the porch, moving slow and easy like he had nowhere else to be. Older guy, I'd guess mid-60s, wearing a flannel jacket, a face that had clearly spent a lot of years outdoors. Said his name was Wendell, said he was the caretaker for the properties around the lake, had been for going on 30 years, made sure nobody's pipes burst and nobody's roof caved in over the winter. Ryan told him about the car, asked if he had jumper cables, and Wendell smiled, this slow, easy smile, and said, "Car trouble. Figured you two might have some."
I want you to sit with that phrasing for a second because I have. He didn't say you might have car trouble. He said some, like he was already anticipating it before Ryan finished the sentence, like it wasn't a guess. He said he didn't have the cables on him, but he'd swing by in the morning with them. Before he turned to leave, though, he looked at me, not at Ryan, and me specifically, and he said, "You'll want to keep that fire going all night. It gets cold out here when it's just two people." I hadn't told him it was just the two of us. Ryan didn't catch it, or if he did, he didn't say anything. He just thanked Wendell and shut the door. And I stood there for a second with this cold little seed of unease sitting right in my chest, the kind you can't quite explain to somebody else without sounding paranoid. We spent the evening working through the closing up checklist, draining the water lines, which involved a lot of banging around in the crawl space with a flashlight, Ryan cursing at a stuck valve while I held the light steady and tried not to think about how dark it was getting outside. By the time we finished, it was fully night. No moon that I remember, just black outside every window, the kind of black that makes your own reflection stare back at you if you get too close to the glass. Around 9, I got up to close the curtains and I looked out toward the lake, and that's when I saw the lights. Not one, several, scattered around the far shoreline and off to our left, small glowing windows in cabins that Ryan had specifically told me were closed up for the season. Nobody home, hadn't been for weeks.
I called him over, and he squinted out at them for a second and just shrugged. Guess we're not as alone out here as they told us. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Late season stragglers, hunters maybe, somebody's relative up doing their own closing up work like us. Perfectly normal explanation. I told myself that while we ate dinner, while we sat by the fire, while the wind started picking up outside and rattling the old window panes in their frames. Around midnight, someone knocked on our door. 3 slow knocks. No voices, no footsteps that either of us heard leading up to the porch, and the porch boards up there creak under any weight at all. We'd both heard them creak plenty that day, just walking in and out ourselves. Ryan got up, and I remember grabbing his arm and telling him to wait, and he laughed it off, said it was probably Wendell checking on us. He opened the door. Nobody there. But down on the porch steps, pressed into the mud from the early rain, there were fresh footprints, bare feet. Not boot prints, not anything with tread, bare human feet, leading up to our door in a straight, deliberate line and then just stopping. No prints leaving away, no prints turning around to walk back down the steps, like whoever made them had simply arrived, stood there, and then just stopped existing. Ryan stared at those prints for a long time before he finally shut the door and locked it, and this time he didn't have a joke ready. We didn't sleep that night. We sat by the fire with every light in that cabin switched on, and I kept glancing at the window every few minutes, watching those distant cabin lights across the lake. And here's the part that still gets to me the most, the part I replayed more than anything else. One by one, over the course of that night, those lights started going out. Not all at once. One would go dark, and then maybe 20, 30 minutes later, another one closer to eyes would go dark too. Slow, steady, like something was moving along the shoreline, house to house, working its way toward eyes and shutting off every light behind it as it came. By 4 in the morning, every single light around that lake was gone, every one of them, except ours. I don't think I need to tell you what that did to the rest of that night. We didn't talk much. We just sat there, watching the door, watching the dark windows, feeding the fire because some primal part of both of us understood that letting it go out was not an option, no matter what Wendell had actually meant by that comment. Dawn came slow and gray, and somewhere around 7, Wendell showed up again with the jumper cables, whistling something under his breath, acting like it was just another ordinary morning. Ryan asked him carefully, trying to keep his voice level, who else was staying out on the lake that weekend. Wendell looked at him for a long moment, long enough that it stopped feeling like a normal pause, and then he said, "Nobody is supposed to be." And then his eyes moved past Ryan's shoulder, toward the porch steps, toward those bare footprints still sitting there in the dried mud, untouched by the morning frost around him.
and he just nodded slowly and said, looks like somebody wanted to make sure you two didn't forget you were here. Nobody explained anything further than that. We got the car started, thanked him too quickly, and got out of there before we'd even really finished the closing up checklist. I don't think either of us cared anymore whether the pipes were fully drained. We didn't look back once on the drive out, not at the lake, not at the cabin, not at windows, standing on the shoulder of the driveway watching us go. So who was in those cabins Ryan swore were closed up and empty for the season? Hit the subscribe, share it with someone who needs a good scare tonight, and drop a like to more people find this channel. One more story is coming after this, and honestly, it's the one that still bothers me the most. Stay close to your find tonight.
I want to tell you something that happened to me 2 winters ago, and I still don't have a good explanation for it. I've told this story to maybe 3 people in my life, and every single time I get to the same part and I just stop. My throat closes up, so bear with me if I need a second. My name's Sarah. I'm 34. I live outside Billings, Montana, and back then I was driving home from my sister's place in Haver after Thanksgiving. It's about a 4-hour drive straight down Highway 2, and there's no gas stations, no rest stops, no lights, just flat white prairie and telephone poles disappearing into the dark on either side of you. I left later than I wanted to, probably around 6 p.m., and the snow started maybe an hour in. Not bad at first, just flurries catching in my headlights. Kind of pretty, actually. I had the radio on, coffee in the cup holder, heat blasting. I remember feeling completely fine. Comfortable even. By hour 2, it wasn't pretty anymore. The wind picked up out of nowhere, and I mean nowhere, because 5 minutes before that, the sky had been calm, and within about 10 minutes, I was in a full whiteout. I couldn't see the road markers. I couldn't see anything past my own hood. I slowed down to like 15 miles an hour, gripping the wheels so hard my knuckles ached. And I remember saying out loud, to nobody, Okay, just get me to the next town. I never made it. I felt the back tire slide before I even understood what was happening. There's this specific sound a truck makes when it loses traction on ice. This low hiss, almost like the tires are exhaling, and then the whole vehicle just drifted, slow and sideways like it had a mind of its own. I went off the shoulder and the front end dropped into a ditch with a thud that knocked my wind out of me. The engine died. Just died. I turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. And that's when it got quiet. Not normal quiet, that thick, ringing kind of quiet where you can hear your own pulse in your ears. Snow ticking against the windshield. That's it. I checked my phone. 1 bar flickering, then gone. No signal. 19% battery because of course I hadn't charged it at my sister's like an idiot. I sat there just breathing, trying to think. I had a blanket in the back seat, half a bottle of water, and that was basically it. I remembered thinking, okay, people survive this. People survive way worse. Just stay in the truck, stay warm, wait for morning. So I did. I wrapped myself in the blanket, kept the hazards blinking even though I doubted anyone could see them past 10 feet, and I watched the snow pile up on the glass until the whole truck felt like it was being buried alive, inch by inch. I don't know how long I sat like that, long enough that my breath had fogged the inside of every window except a little patch I kept wiping clear with my sleeve. And it was through that little patch, maybe an hour in, that I saw it the first time. A shape. Out past the ditch where the land opens out into nothing but white. Just standing there. I want to be really specific about this because I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times. It wasn't moving, it wasn't a bush or a fence post or trick of the snow because those don't have the proportions of a person. This had shoulders, this had a head. It was taller than any person I've ever stood next to, and it was just facing my trunk. Not walking toward it, just facing it. I froze up completely. I remember my hand hovering over the door lock even though I knew it was already locked, just needing to hear that click like it meant something.
and told myself it was a person, a rancher maybe, checking on stranded drivers. That happens out there. I even rolled the window down an inch. God, I don't know why. Some instinct to call out for help. And the second the gap opened, the cold hit me like a slap. And underneath the wind, I swear I heard something. Not words, more like a long, low exhale, way too big to be human breath carried on the wind from a distance that didn't make sense for me to hear it at all. I rolled the window up so fast I pinched my sleeve in it. When I looked back out through my little cleared patch of glass, the shape was gone.
Just gone. No footprints leading away. Not that I could have seen footprints in that whiteout anyway, but there was no sign it had ever moved. It had simply stopped being there. I sat in that truck telling myself every rational thing I could think of. Snowblindness, exhaustion. Your eyes play tricks on you in a whiteout. Everyone knows that. I actually said it out loud. You're seeing things, Sarah. Like hearing my own voice would fix it. It didn't help for long, because about 20 minutes later, I heard something touch the truck. Not wind, not snow. A deliberate, single tap, low on the driver's side door, right about where a hand would land if someone crouched down beside the vehicle. My whole body locked up. I didn't breathe, I didn't move. I just stared at that door, like staring at it hard enough could see through the metal. Another tap. Higher this time, like whatever it was standing up. I grabbed my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and turned the flashlight on, pointed it at the window like that would do anything, like light was some kind of weapon. All it showed me was my own reflection and the snow rushing sideways past the glass. Then, right at the edge of my flashlight's reflection, past my own face staring back at me, I saw it again, right up against the passenger window this time, close enough that if the glass hadn't been there, we'd have been face to face. I still don't have the right words for what I saw in that half second before I threw myself away from that window and into the driver's seat. Too still, too tall, and I swear to you, its head was tilted, like it was curious about me, studying me. I don't remember deciding to scream. I just remember doing it and then slamming both hands over my mouth like I could take the sound back because some deep animal part of my brain understood that being quiet mattered, that whatever this was, drawing its attention more than I already had would be the worst mistake of my life. I sat like that, hands over my mouth, eyes shut, blanket pulled up over my head like a kid hiding from a nightmare, for what felt like hours. Every few minutes, another tap, sometimes on the hood, sometimes on the roof, directly above me, slow, almost rhythmic, like it was pacing. And then, at some point, the taps just stopped. I didn't trust it. I didn't move for a long, long time after that. When I finally worked up the nerve to look, gray light was coming through the snow, early morning. The storm had let up some. And when I finally saw headlights coming down the highway toward me, I have never in my life felt relief like that. A snowplow driver pulled over, helped me get the truck out of the ditch, gave me his own gloves because mine were soaked through. He asked if I was okay, and I said yes, because what else do you say? I didn't tell him what I saw. I still don't tell most people. But here's the detail that keeps me up at night, the one I haven't told you yet. When they winched my truck out of that ditch, the plow driver pointed at the snow around the passenger side and asked, kind of casual, "You get out and walk around at some point?" I said no. I never got out of that truck, not once. He just looked at me a second too long and then pointed at a row of prints in the fresh snow, circling the truck over and over in a tight ring around the vehicle. Prints that were bare, human-shaped, but too long, too wide at the heel, leading nowhere, coming from nowhere. I've never driven Highway 2 at night since. Can you help me figure it out?
If it was a person out there, why were there no boots, no tire tracks, nothing but bare prints in a blizzard cold enough to kill a person in 20 minutes? If you've ever been stranded somewhere you weren't supposed to be alone, I want to hear about it. Share it with us. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, share this with someone who loves getting scared, and give it a like so more people find their way to this channel. I've got 2 more stories like this one coming. Stay safe out there, and maybe don't drive Highway 2 in a snowstorm.